Every jump story is a favorite. And I can't believe how many I've heard. I mean, I just heard another one on my way over here. We won't even get into that. But yeah, they're all fantastic. But I think in Idaho, one that's very memorable, I jumped a two-man fire with Brian Cox, who's no longer with us, died in a plane crash. And if you want some other information, follow the history of the obituaries of jumpers and look at how they died, what situations, and they were living hard. Most of them were living hard on the way out. Brian and I jumped a fire, and there was no jump spot. It was on the top of a ridge. Actually, the fire was on the east side of the ridge, which dropped off very sharply, so they're going to drop us on the west side of the ridge. And there was no jump spot. There were just thick trees. And every time I've looked at a head of broccoli, to cut up broccoli, you imagine the greenery of a broccoli, that's how thick the trees were. So we did it. And I was the second man out, and picked out what I thought was a clearing, but there was no way I was getting into it. But I picked out two trees and tried to go between the two trees, hoping the canopy would grab the trees above me. And it was perfect. It caught real well, very solid, except my momentum threw me into the tree in front of it. And in my personal gear bag on my waist, I had a toothbrush. You know how flexible a toothbrush is. It snapped that in half. And but I didn't put my hand out, because I heard that Jerry Dixon, a fellow I trained with, had broken his wrist that way earlier in the summer. So anyway, I bounced off of that, and I had to do about a 50-foot letdown. And first time I'd ever hung up, first time I had to do this, one of the few, very few fire jumps. So I picked up my face mask and pulled out my letdown rope, tied it off as I was supposed to, went through the system, but it didn't seem quite right. So when Brian came over to check on me, I asked him to go through this, and all the time I said, well, I did this, and I was waving my hand all the time. And he asked, what was the problem? And I said, well, there's flies up here, a lot of flies. And then he gave an exclamation and said, those aren't flies. And he pointed to my left, where just a little bit beyond my reach was a hornet's nest, a very large, probably a 20-inch diameter hornet, the biggest thing I've ever seen for hornets. And I just cut away and dropped and zipped to the ground real quick. Whether it was hooked up or not, I was out of there. So then we went to the fire. We had the problem of this parachute hung up with the hornets. So we came back later when things would have settled down, and because we had a letdown rope on the risers, we didn't have to climb the tree, or I didn't have to climb the tree. And so we pulled and finally got it out. But when we brought it out, it brought the branch with the hornet's nest with it. So that hit the ground, and they were not pleased. So again, we ran away, came back, and we kept pulling the chute, and we just kept dragging the hornet's nest up the hill. So, and Brian was maybe shoulder high on me, very short. And so since I was taller, much taller, he put on my jump gear. We tucked in the cuffs in the legs, and he put on his helmet, and we put a rubber field bag over his head. That's what we packed our reserves in. And not giving him much thought, because you can't breathe in a rubber bag too long. But so he walked down the hill and was going to pick up the branch and throw it away. And and I was to guide him, because once the bees came, he was going to pull it down around his neck. And so we did that. He was walking along, and he could hear him hitting, like popcorn hitting the rubber bag. And I'm trying to act serious, but by then I was laughing pretty good. So he holds the bag around his neck, and he walks down, and I guide him left, right, 2 steps forward. And finally, then the bag starts, every time he would breathe, it would expand and contract. And it's just this rubber bladder, and he's hot, and he's muffled sound. I can't understand what he's saying. So I'm yelling at him, and he ends up picking up the branch with the hornet's nest on it. And I told him to throw it to his, throw it off to the side. So as he throws it, it catches on his glove, drops to the ground, and all the hornets in the world came out. And he was running out of air, very hot. So he turned, and I just said, run uphill. And he ran uphill. And when I said 2 steps to the right, he only took 1. and hit a tree dead on, dropped to his knees, and and then I was laughing so hard, so he finally gets up, and follow my voice. So he gets up there, and he finally gets some air, and we run up the hill, and he takes the bag off his head, and we're standing there, we're both dying laughing, and then the hornets found us, and I got stung on the nose and the corner of the eye. He got them all around his lips and an ear, and so we ran some more, and then we sat around in the evening and just laughed at each other. My nose got very large. His lips, he couldn't even talk very well. His eye was all swollen shut. It looked like we were a couple boxers that just got beat up real bad. And that's my memory of Brian Cox, who's no longer with us. So, but every fire has something like that.